welcome to my channel. So originally I was going to post an update on the cosplay that I'm currently working on, but I am still deeply involved in hand beading. Again, it's not super exciting content, so I decided to go ahead and post a community post with that update, which should have gone up by now. So I thought while I would continue to work on those panels that I would once again post another commentary video and continue my accidental month of Snow White, I guess, with another costume analysis of a Snow White movie. I am going to go see the new live action movie tomorrow, so I'll have more to say about that later, but if you want my initial impressions of Snow White's dress specifically from the 2025 movie, I do have a video that I made a couple of weeks ago. It's based solely off of the trailer because it hadn't been released yet. And then my other Snow White movie was about Mirror Mirror, which is a costuming masterpiece. I highly recommend checking out my video or going and watching the movie because it is a wonderful experience for people who love costuming like me. And then next week I plan to have another costuming commentary video, and hopefully I will be through the majority of my hand beading and can give a proper update on my competition build. But until then, let's geek out over some more beautiful costuming. As always, if you like this video, hit the like button, drop any comments down in the comment section below, and subscribe for more content from me. For this week, I thought it would be fun to talk about probably my all-time favorite Snow White movie, which is Snow White and the Huntsman. Snow White is not my favorite fairy tale. I've mentioned that in my previous videos, but this movie is a retelling of the original tale. They do try to empower Snow White, which is what I think the 2025 version is trying to do, but they spend a lot of time on the evil queen, who is Charlize Theron, and the evil queen's name is Ravenna in this movie. They do spend a lot of time on her, and she is phenomenal. She stole the show. Kristen Stewart was Snow White. I'm just not a fan of her as an actress in general, and she was not my favorite in this movie, but she was coming off the heels of Twilight, and it made sense that she was in this movie. I think this was released in 2012, and it had Chris Hemsworth as the Huntsman. Total high-ranking cast, and the movie production value is extremely high, and of course, they got the queen herself to costume this movie, and that is Colleen Atwood. You are probably familiar with Colleen Atwood. She did the costuming for things such as Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, so that stunning pink coat of Queenie's is her work. She did Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, Memoirs of a Geisha, Sleepy Hollow, and weirdly, she did the costuming for My Chemical Romance's Black Parade music video, which is still one of my all-time favorite songs and one of my all-time favorite music videos. She's done a lot of work in Hollywood, and she's won a lot of awards. I was not really surprised that when I started to research on the costuming in this movie that it turned out that it was indeed Colleen Atwood's work. She seems to be a constant presence in my life as I recreate costumes for myself. Not all of them are wins, though she did do the live action Little Mermaid, which is not my favorite, which is another video that I did a year or so ago. But other than that, her costuming is typically top-notch. And I personally think that Snow White and the Huntsman is one of her best. I am specifically going to focus on Ravenna, the evil queen, in this because that is really where the costuming shines. Snow White kind of stays in the same dress for most of the movie. A couple changes here, and she has armor at the end. The Huntsman doesn't really change all that much, although I will say Snow White's coronation gown, I forgot she had that. Her coronation gown is really pretty, but the queen, the evil queen, has the best costumes, and you get to see her character arc through the costumes themselves. So fun fact, she designed over 2,000 costumes for this movie, and she mentioned that the craftsmanship level in this movie specifically was her best of her career so far. So again, that was over a decade ago, but when we get into the dresses, you will absolutely be able to see the perfection that is the craftsmanship. If I had anyone walk into the judging room in a cosplay contest that I was judging and their costume was made this expertly, I would just pass out. I would fall down because of the incredible talent. It would overwhelm me and I would just pass out. So with that very brief introduction into the movie and me fangirling over Colleen Atwood, let's go ahead and hop into the costume analysis. So we're going to start off with her very first outfit. I'm actually not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's not super interesting from this perspective because we really don't get to see a lot of it. So she is in this, it looks like an ivory type gown with a cloak of brocade, and it's very dirty, very worn. She's chained into this carriage. It's meant to portray a level of innocence and make her appear to be a damsel in distress. Clearly, she's chained. However, she is not a damsel in distress. This is like a Trojan horse situation because this is her army that the king is trying to fight, and the king rescues her from her fake captivity, but he doesn't know. And as soon as he sees her beauty, he is essentially, he falls in love with her deeply or is bewitched into marrying her. Which brings us to the actual star of the introduction of this movie, and that is Ravenna's wedding dress. Her wedding dress is my second favorite look in the entire film. Potentially the entire Snow White and the Huntsman franchise. There's actually 2 movies, and the costuming in the second movie, Colleen Atwood also did, I believe, and it is just as beautiful, but this dress is remarkable. The craftsmanship of this dress is amazing. The design is, it's hard to put into words how much I love this dress. So we'll start with probably my favorite part, which is the skirt. This skirt is incredibly interesting. So first of all, there is a base underskirt or dress, which if we zoom in on the waist area, you can see there's this plain white going behind the pleating. And when I was looking at this, I realized that the top part of the pleated skirt actually isn't attached to the dress at the top. It appears to be attached only at these little metal hooks or closures all around the hip area of the skirt. And the top part of the skirt, so then the top of these pleats aren't actually sewn onto the skirt, and I was able to confirm that this is removable. This skirt apparently was incredibly heavy, so they made it removable so that Charlize Theron could take it off when they were doing waist up shots, so she didn't have to stand there in this really heavy skirt for the entirety of the filming. So that is super interesting to know that it's removable, which means those little gold pieces at the top of the pleating, I was correct in thinking that those are like hooks. I actually think this is, I don't know the right word for it. I'm gonna call it like pyramid pleating because that's what it looks like to me. Essentially, it's like they cut one side of the pleat out of white, cut the other side of the pleat out of gold, and they sewed it together at the top. So you'd have like the white and the gold, and they sewed it like that so that it created a triangle. And they ran piping down the middle, which is this like gold looking strip that we see, and I was able to confirm that that is leather piping. So they do have leather piping in the middle, and then they do that again and again and again, so you get this interesting pleated effect. And when I saw that hemline on the bottom in the wedding scene, I am pretty certain that is how they made this. So you would just cut them at a taper so that the triangles, the pyramids are smaller at the waist and then get bigger at the bottom, and you can mimic that type of skirt. So I think that is incredibly clever for creating this very visually interesting dress that looks like normal knife pleats but is not, and it's also completely removable, which as a cosplayer is super appreciated because that would make going to the bathroom a little easier. So cosplayers, if you are thinking of making this, keep that in mind. The skirt is actually removable. So moving up to the bodice of course is also stunning. So when I first looked at this, I also thought that this bodice was separate from the skirt, but when you see the back, it actually looks like it mimics a separate bodice, but is actually one piece. So I actually think that this top is just all one piece. In the back, the lacing goes all the way down past where the back of the bodice goes. Oh, and there's no clear line that I can see that's dividing the bodice from the bottom. So I'm thinking it's one dress with an overskirt. And then they added these this petal hem to sort of mimic the look of a bodice. Now, this is just my observations based on what I could see from the movie and a few still photos that I found on the internet. I have no confirmation if this is true, but that is my best guess. The bodice itself, of course, beautifully fitted against Charlize Theron. It's that gorgeous gold embroidery in the front, and I love the nod to slashing. Slashing was a huge part of history for a very long time. Typically you would have like your undershirt, your chemise, and you would pull it through the slashes and get those little white puffs that we see in paintings. That's not happening here, and I actually really love that. We have these deep gores in the front that are laced together by like a thin gold wire, and then the same sort of slashing effect is happening on the sleeves that her maids are actually lacing up in this seam. And I'm glad we get to see this seam, because here we can also see that there are slashes in the shoulders that are laced together, and we get a really good close-up and can get some detail of that beautiful gold work. This is very hard to see at the wedding scene, so I'm very happy that we get just a little glimpse of it here for a minute or so. And then it goes to the wedding scene, and we get a beautiful shot of her hair, which mimics this then cage effect on her shoulders. This, according to Colleen, is meant to look like bones, like a rib cage sort of thing. A bone cage is how she described it. She also mentioned that in the movie they used a bunch of different techniques from history, and one of the techniques they used was stiffening parchment paper and shaping that into what they needed to be shaped into. Now, I could not find confirmation on where that technique was used, but I would bet that it is this bone cage. It looks like it could be parchment. They also stored it in a hat box because it's very delicate, so I absolutely think that that's what that is made out of, which is super cool, and I want more detail on the construction of this, but I couldn't find a lot of information, unfortunately. I feel like that happens all the time. We just don't get the details of how things were constructed for movies. We get brief interviews on the inspiration and the drawings and taking that into reality, but we never really get to talk about, well, how did you do this part? How did you do this? But that's my frustration as a cosplayer that recreates costumes. So obviously I want all of the details, but that is my guess, that that is made out of parchment. So this bone cage is added, and as I said, it does cover up that slashing a little bit, makes it a little difficult to see if you're not looking for it. And then she has this cape. I do wish we had more close-ups of this cloak. I don't know the detail of it. I have no idea what design is on it. It kind of looks pink in places. It kind of looks gold, and I can tell there's some sort of beading or sequence or something on it that's making it glisten, but other than that, I have no idea. That's all I have for that, but it's definitely attached to this bone cage, so it is separate from the wedding dress itself. But super stunning gown in this beautiful white and gold, and what's quite interesting is we have this color that makes her appear very innocent, not quite evil, and we never see her in these colors again. Well, after her wedding night, which is I'm not really going to go over because she's just in like a nightgown, but after that, all the dresses we see her in progressively get darker, which is a nice touch to her evilness sort of taking over her. So skipping over the bathrobe and her nightgown, housecoat, next time we get to see her is actually on the throne several years later. This dress is actually the first cosplay I ever made, which was like 99% hot glued and many years ago. I loved this dress so much, and it just does not get as much attention as one of her later dresses, but it is just a gorgeous dress, and it looks to be made of tiny little metal plates and little rings holding this place together. So it might be considered a form of chainmail, but she is just draped in this armor, which makes a lot of sense because she's become a very hard person because of her life and her backstory. She's very much about defense, keeping her and her brother safe, and showing that she has power. So we're getting a good look at her defense here. And of course she's adorned with this claw ring and this sharp looking crown, so we get a lot of spikes added to it, which reflect that she is also very dangerous. But her coloring here, the color of the dress, we've gone from that white and gold, now we've gone to this slightly tarnished silver type of look, which is the running themes. Her style of dress has gotten darker and harder, which is reflecting what is going on with her character. One really interesting design element with this is we have this long cape, and it actually comes over her shoulders and wraps around her arms like one fluid sleeve, but it is kind of like a cape in the back, but it also goes under the beading of the collar, so it is all just one dress, but we have multiple layers and multiple pieces that are draped to give it more dimension and more interest on the screen. So the next dress is one that I'm sure you have seen if you've seen anything with this movie. And this is one that is commonly referred to as Ravenna's crow dress, her skull dress, her raven skull dress, whatever combination of those words, but this is her skull dress. This dress is actually meant to depict her evil queen status. If you had to pick one dress out of the whole movie and say what outfit would be her evil queen outfit in a Disneyland park, it's this one. This is her evil queen dress. We've gone darker. It's the first time we've seen her in black. She has kept the silver elements and the hard look and feel. We've kept the sharp edges, and we've added skulls, so symbols of death, to this. She's looking very dark, very evil, and very dangerous, but she still has this breastplate going on that looks impenetrable, so we still have some defense mechanism going on, specifically over the heart, over the chest. So we're seeing a progression in the movie of her becoming more evil, and this is like her first moment of actually being the true evil queen. She was always evil before, but this is like her awakening moment, according to Colleen Atwood and her vision for how she was designing the progression of these costumes. Breaking this dress down, I actually recently created this dress for myself. It's not finished. I'm actually got quite a bit more work to put into it, but I did break this down quite a bit. If you want to see my construction videos, I do have 4 different videos on how I made this dress. If you're interested, I'll make sure to link them down below. I am very familiar with this. Out of all of them, this is what I'm most familiar on, so I can break this dress down quite a bit for you. So starting off, this dress actually has a silver base underdress, which we can see in the very front of the skirt. I actually think this is made out of some sort of textured velvet, like it looks a little crushed to give some sort of additional texture to it. It's not quite silver. It actually appears to be a little on the tarnished silver side, but I personally used a silver textured satin because that's what I could find, and I didn't want to dye anything. And then on top of the underdress, there's this black skirt. So the underdress itself has a very fantasy medieval style cut to it. You can tell that there's a little nod to history, but a lot of this is very fantasy related. It has a little bit of a train, and then you have this black overskirt, which is made of a sheer black material, so you do get the shine of the silver through it in the right lighting, and it is much fuller than the silver underdress and has a longer train. I do believe there is some sort of hip roll under this dress to give it some oomph. When I created it, I just used quite a bit of fabric gathered up at the waist to give that sort of lift effect, but I think she probably has a bum roll. Moving up onto the top part of the outfit, so the silver dress actually also has sleeves to it. The base silver fabric is part of these sleeves. You probably wouldn't notice unless you're really tearing it apart like I was, but you can see little glimpses of that same fabric in between this ribbon that she has wrapped around the entirety of each sleeve. I could not find anything similar to that lace ribbon, so I actually used a jacquard ribbon, over 5 yards of it actually, and spaced it up each sleeve myself. We have the sleeves which are wrapped in this ribbon, and then she has buttons in between, in the middle of everywhere those ribbons crossed, in the seams going all the way up the sleeve to the armhole, even under the rest of the like sleeve poof fabric. So she puts layer upon layer of detail on her costumes in this movie. We've got the underdress, again an underdress and an overskirt, We've got the long sleeve with the poof sleeve and the drapes and the corset. So she just, everywhere you look, there's more detail to absorb in these costumes. So we have the sleeves again with all the ribbons on it. And then we have the poof and the draping, which is pretty self-explanatory, I think, but on the sleeve drapes themselves, there's some sort of gem work or beading to give a little sparkle to our evil queen. And then the top of the dress has these black feather details, and then on top of the black feather details, there's this metal filigree plating, and in between each of the metal filigree plating, we've got these black textured discs. I personally used black buttons. I don't know what these are, but there is some sort of texture on them. And then of course we have the pro skulls, which are not real skulls. They're plastic, but they're molded off of a real skull. Those are spaced evenly around the top. So that's a lot of layers of detail just on the dress. And then we add on top of everything else, this corset, which really does take a nod to 18th century stays, particularly with the shape of the corset at the top and the bottom with the tabs that are, which are those little pieces that are sticking out. They get a nice flare to them, probably because of that bum roll. Mine flare out quite nicely due to the lacing. She's got these little additional metal filigrees going around each point at the tabs on the bottom of the corset. This type of stays has a lot of boning into it. Pretty much every inch of it is covered in boning. Back in the day, it'd be reed. We often use zip ties in place of reboning, which is what I used. When I created this, I used an 18th century stays pattern that I then modified a little bit, fit the shape of what this is in the movie. And in the movie, from what I can tell, I can't see the boning channels. Typically, you put the boning on the inside and then you can put outer fabric on top of that to hide the ridges of the boning channels. But I put so much effort into stitching straight, 114 boning channels. I left mine visible. I was like, this is the straightest stitching of my life, and I want people to see it. So on my corset, you have that texture visible, but I can't really see it on here. Additionally, on the front, we have this, what I call the breastplate. It looks like armor. According to an interview with Colleen Atwood, it was meant to look like twisting snakes. I always thought it looked kind of like vines, which to me made a lot of sense with Ravenna, but snakes is what it's supposed to be. I used a thermoplastic called Warbler and rolled out a bunch of those and wove them all together. Again, I have a whole video about it, and then I stitched that onto the front of the corset. And then of course we have more skulls going down the center of the bodice. And then to top everything off, she's decked out in jewelry, this gorgeous crown of bones and sharp shards of what looks like iron. And then she's got these draped metal things going under her chin. I think that's a nod to maybe the Disney movie design with how the Evil Queen in Snow White has her hair completely covered in that black hood. It just feels like a nod to the original Snow White movie. But all in all, my favorite dress in the entire movie, the one that the movie was famous for, her Evil Queen dress, and I did finally get to make it, but it is just another stunning piece of work. It makes her feel regal, makes her feel dangerous. She sort of blends into the shadows and at the same time sparkles and absorbs the light. She's hard and defensive and it's so good. And then we see her in my least favorite dress of the whole movie, which is this gold brocade dress. The shape is very simple. It almost doesn't seem to fit into the lineup of other dresses we've seen. And it also doesn't quite match the theme that Colleen Atwood was explaining about how her costumes get darker and darker and darker in the movie until she puts the cloak on. And when she puts the cloak on, it all makes sense because the cloak is entirely made of feathers. And actually, it's made of rooster feathers that took the creator over 4 weeks to make. And these feathers are layered in a bunch of different ways to give a variety to the texture and the way the light reflects off of it. I don't particularly like the cloak. I think the one in the sequel is better because it's kind of dripped in gold. But it does lend to her namesake, Ravenna, raven, crow. She becomes a flock of crows in this dress, or ravens, I don't know. And she becomes birds in this dress and flies off to give Snow White the poison apple. And it fits her character quite well. So when you think about it in the context of she's become darker and darker and darker, at this point the cloak does take up the majority of the color story. in her outfit and does really envelop her. But she doesn't wear it for too terribly long, because after she poisons Snow White, she then gets into her final look. This is what I call the battle dress. This is what she wears for the rest of the movie and for her showdown with our armored Snow White, sword in hand. It is potentially the most modern looking of the dresses besides the gold one. The gold one feels very modern. This one feels also modern in the waist down, and then the waist up feels very fantasy. So the waist down is more of a fitted skirt. Not my favorite out of everything. Probably ranks just above the gold dress in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of the silhouette, but it makes sense. She wouldn't have a big flowing dress if she thinks she's going into battle. So having something a little more form-fitted, and we've come back to having the chainmail look again. Of course, she is going to battle. She knows this is a fight to the death, and so she's got her defenses up, and she is decked out in those little gold plates of chainmail once again, and the collar is covered in leather spikes. She is at her most dangerous. This is her last stand against Snow White, and she is trying to exude the danger and power that she has, and I think it really works. You don't want to touch this dress. This dress looks uncomfortable to touch. It's spiky and it's got all those little plates. It just doesn't look like it's going to feel very nice to get close to. It looks like it has a skirt and a bodice part, and it has this deep cut down the front, but other than that, I don't particularly find it super interesting. That's just my opinion. I just feel like her other outfits throughout the movie are more visually interesting, and it doesn't help that in this particular scene during this battle, the color grading on the movie is so dark. It's really hard to see the details of the costume. I don't even think we get a full view of it clearly. I think the only full view we get is her standing in the window, which makes it incredibly hard to see. So I have a screenshot that I found of it on display, and that really just didn't help. I think it would look better on Charlize Theron than on the mannequin. So not a big fan of this one. I don't really have that much to say. Clearly, her crow dress is number one and her wedding dress is number two, in my opinion. But there is one more dress that I just found out about. So when I was looking up images for this movie, I stumbled upon this blue dress that I'm like, where was this? And I kept seeing things about how Colleen Atwood had created a dress made of dung beetle shells. There were several articles written on the unusual dress that was made for this movie, but no further details really were available outside of the fact that the people who created it had to wear special gloves to sew with the shells because apparently they're razor sharp, which I had no idea. And and on top of it, that no beetles were harmed in the making of this movie. Colleen Atwood was in Thailand and saw them for sale, and apparently, so they were used and the shells were left over and they were selling the shells. So like it was all ethically sourced. But this dress is quite interesting. It is a deep teal color and the design doesn't really fit anywhere in the movie. It's the deep teal with this brown, probably would have looked more gold on screen, chiffon fabric all over. I could see this maybe replacing her battle dress at the end. She's completely covered up to her neck, full sleeves, full gown, lots of flowy fabric, but it still kind of feels like armor with the shape of the shoulders and the sleeves. And then the beetle wings are sewn all around it to give it this iridescence. But I just don't quite know where this would be, especially when you think of the color story that Colleen was explaining about going from light to dark. So it's somewhere in the middle, and in the context of the story, I just don't know where that would be. I went back to the movie and I was searching for this dress and I could not find it. I'm like, I had to have missed it somewhere, and then come to find out this dress never actually made it to the movie. We have a couple images of Charlene wearing it, but it never made the final cut. So it is a gorgeous dress, and the idea is there. I honestly don't even think that it's as well executed as the other dresses. So it's kind of a shame that it wasn't used after all this work was put into it, but I totally understand nixing this dress. It just doesn't suit the movie like the other dresses do. I think it would have taken away from the costuming design as a whole. So those were my thoughts on the costuming of the evil queen in Snow White and the Huntsman. I would love to know your thoughts on this. Is this a movie that you've seen? Do you like the costuming in this? What are your favorite costumes by Colleen Atwood? I would love to know. I would love to go and check those out if I haven't seen them already. Like I said, I'm going to go see the live action Snow White tomorrow. I'm very interested in the costuming of the evil queen in that movie. I'm not super interested in the movie itself. It's just not really my movie, but I do want to see what they did with the evil queen, and I'm too impatient to wait for it to come out. So I'll probably have those thoughts in next week's video, and then we'll see where my crafting is at that point to see if I can make at least an interesting update at that point in time. But I'm getting very close to finishing the skirt on my Sakizo build, so I'm very excited to share that with you all. It's just, I'm making 7 identical panels. That just does not make for interesting content, you know? So let me know your thoughts on this movie and on the costuming. Which dress was your favorite? I would also love to know that. Like this video if you liked it. Make sure to hit the subscribe button for more content from me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!